Thank you, Vikas, for joining the Bridge India team on World Water Day.
Well, thank you very much.
So what do you think of water status at this point in time?
Well, India is facing its worst ever water crisis in the history. If we look at the statistics, almost 600 million people out of 1.2 billion people are facing extreme to high level of water stress. We just look at simple statistics that 640 districts are there in the country, and roughly around 400 districts are facing stress on water. Simply put, if we look at the water table, we have 54% of the water sources which are showing declining water table. If we look at simply the entire cut of the population over last 70 years, since we gained independence, water table has gone down by 70%. So you can see the per capita water availability is reduced by 70% over this period of time. So roughly around it's 1% every year. So which is very stark. You look at the water quality index. Water quality index is a global problem, but water is a major issue in India. We are at 120th pedestal out of 122 countries in that case. So this is a very stark situation which we are facing, which is unprecedented. 21 cities, out of the major cities in India are facing day zero in 2020, where we are sitting right now. So you can imagine the level of the problem which we are facing, and India continues to be the leading water extractor globally. So this problem is further compounded on that, and climate change is playing its own role. So the problem is up there for the bracing. We are yet to face this stress, but I hope we suddenly wake up and start acting on it.
So how do you think that the lack of access to water is a driver to vicious circle of poverty?
Well, poverty is a cycle which is propounded by the fact that if water is not there, you got to spend hours on fetching water itself. If you look at the most marginalized get missed out into the water cycle, because they don't have access to the drinking water. Whatever the water is available is poor in terms of quality, and then on top of it there are water cartels which work. So if we look at, which is the most basic part or the foundation of the existence, is not freely available to majority of the people. Now just imagine if they were to kind of just go around and spend their productive time, spend their economic activity hours on fetching water. They pay a very heavy price on that. Now studies are there to suggest that most of the marginalized, they end up paying around 30 to 40% of their income on just fetching the water itself. And if you just simply look at that, the water which they get still is poor in terms of the quality, which further compounds their health related issues, and it leads them into continuous vicious cycle of poverty itself, which they are not able to come out of.
Okay, so how does WaterAid see a CSR role in this scheme of things, and how can investment on CSR pave the way to larger development?
Well, if we look at CSR in India, CSR is really warming up to a great extent. There is a law which came into effect around 5 years ago. Most of the corporates are just warming up to the fact that, look, they got to contribute. But now let's look at some of the statistics. Only 7% gets spent over wash, which very clearly indicates that water is not a key priority for the CSR. Sure. If we look at, there are only 5 states which get repetitive funding, which accounts for almost half the amount of overall CSR kitty in that, which also means that rest of the geographies which are highly vulnerable or they have high poverty index, they don't get serviced well. So example, take Jharkhand, take Bihar, take Chhattisgarh, UP, these are the belts which are underserved. So if we look at this aspect, this continuously reminds us of a syndrome which is called as backyard syndrome, which most of our corporate sector is suffering with. It indicates that they want to go back into those areas where their offices are, but they are agnostic of the fact that the poverty and the marginalization is existing to a greater extent much beyond their backyards or much beyond their fences itself. So it's high time the CSR also starts looking beyond their fences. It is high time that they start looking at water as a key driver of various aspects. If water is not good, it leads to health issues. So if we are just trying to treat the symptoms, or should we try and treat the basic reasons of that? So that's where CSR needs to really relook at.
So, but then how does WaterAid tackle such situations, and what solution does it provide?
Well, interestingly, WaterAid has been working in this space for last over 34 years in India itself. Globally, we have an experience of around 40 years, working in the different parts of the world. If we just look at, providing very unique solutions, which we do, essentially we look at not only the water side of it, but we even link it with sanitation and hygiene, which are very closely related to water recycling and other such aspects. So if we put this together, we look at the community-based solutions. We start from the very fact that, what are the need assessments? What does the community basically need? What are the level of water availability within the communities itself? What kind of water budgeting they can do, how they can arrive at solutions which are pertaining to their own customized needs itself, and then how do really they go around distribution of that water through mini piped water supply. So that's on one hand. At the same time, looking at the community behavioral change aspect, very closely sit within the center of our entire gamut of things. So how their behavior changes over a period of time, how they look at the equitable distribution within that, how do they look at the inclusion of women into the entire game of things.
Okay.
So this is how we also look at the other side of it. The third side is very important again. We look at the water sustainability part. How does water become sustainable from the source point of view? Distribution is one part, but if water itself is not going to be there, then how are we going to fare on a larger run? So we look at that aspect, that how water rejuvenation of the sources, how we look at rainwater harvesting mechanisms, how do we really look at how do we make it sustainable over a period of time. So I very often say it's like a bank account. You don't add enough savings to it, you will not have enough to extract after a point in time. So it's high time we look at that, and this is what WaterAid does.
Yeah, one more thing, Vikas. What other initiatives WaterAid undertakes to create a water sensitive constituency?
Well, I think we work very closely with different corporates, and essentially the way we look at it is that we address their key three pillars. We start with, apart from CSR, I'm talking about particularly, CSR is very programmatically driven. These are designed interventions, but beyond that, when we look at participation from the corporates, we address their three key pillars, which are we address their employee engagement and volunteering to basically create a socially responsible constituency of people who understand water as an issue and then undertakes it within their own settings of things, may it be in their offices, their homes, or even around their homes itself. The other part which we take is that investments in the supply chain management. Lots of corporates have their supply chains. For example, we are working in the garment and artisan supply chains. We are working in leather tannery supply chains. We are working in apparel supply chains. We're working in agricultural supply chains, and we look at those aspects, that how investments in the supply chains can pave the way for much larger returns for the corporates and business houses in that sense. There is very interesting aspect on that, which we can talk separately when a dedicated time arrives on that. But having said so, the third pillar which we address is that we look at the customer base of different corporates, essentially looking at for example, the cause-related marketing campaigns, which could create a sensitive set of their customer bases, which is very critical to pave a larger change and transformation in the context of our country itself. So I think these are the things which essentially we work with corporates beyond the space of the CSR per se.
I'm impressed, Vikas. I see that WaterAid is really doing great work. Thank you so much, Vikas, for giving us valuable inputs.
Thank you, Neelam, and thank you to Bridge India as well for taking up such responsible issues, which I think is a very responsible way of creating awareness and participation, which is unprecedented. And I wish Bridge India all the very best in taking these issues even in future as well. Thank you very much.